Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Andres from AA Sports back with another football video as I cover the CONCACAF Gold Cup tournament. We are nearing the end of the second match days for each team, and we already know some teams that have guaranteed their spot in the next round of the tournament, as well as some teams whose road will unfortunately come to an end in the group stage. And with that, we are starting to see a full picture of what the quarterfinals will look like. So in this video, I'm going to summarize how the tournament has gone so far and where every team stands right now. Starting with Group A, all teams in Group A have completed 2 of their 3 group stage games. Mexico and Costa Rica have won both of their games so far against the Dominican Republic and Suriname. With that, both Mexico and Costa Rica are safe and automatically in the quarterfinals. However, this doesn't mean either team can afford to tank in this final group stage game, as they will play against each other in the final match day, and this game will decide who finishes first in the group, and will have that easier matchup in the quarterfinals against the second place finishers in Group D. Focusing on Mexico first, it has been the defense that has been the biggest strength of the team so far on both ends of the ball, with Cesar Montes being the top goal scorer for the team so far. However, Mexican fans are feeling split about this, as the big concern with the team is the lack of offensive creativity in the midfield. This leaves their star strikers and players like Raul, Santi, and Julian Quiñones with little to no help up front. Look for Mexico to try and address this in their final group stage game against Costa Rica, and see if players like Chino Huerta finally get to start, or even 16-year-old Gilberto Mora, which can hopefully improve the offensive front. As for Costa Rica, their first game of the tournament felt like football on drugs, winning 4-3 against Suriname. A high-scoring game that they won, but it did come at a brutal price, to say the least. Warren Madrigal entered the game for Los Ticos in the second half, and while competing for the ball with Menti Abena, they both went down, and Madrigal ended up sustaining a broken left leg. Ouch. A devastating injury for him, one you hate to see, regardless of which team you support. He did undergo a successful surgery. To give you guys a bit of an update, surgery for the leg, and the injury was successful. Obviously, he will not be able to play for a while, but hopefully we do see him back on the field after a full and hopefully quicker than expected recovery. In their second game against the Dominican Republic, they definitely were sweating in this game. Ball possession between both teams was split pretty even, and entering the 80th minute mark, it looked as if Costa Rica would have to settle for a shocking draw. However, Costa Rica got very lucky and capitalized on a turnover in the final minutes by the Dominican defense to survive and win 2-1. For Costa Rica, there are definitely concerns for this team on both ends of the ball. Conceding 3 goals to Suriname, including a penalty, is not ideal, and offensively, they have been slightly underperforming as well. Against Suriname, 2 of their 4 goals were from penalty kicks, and the winning goal against the Dominicans came on a bad defensive error by the opposing defense. So this game against Mexico will be very interesting to see, as both will look to improve their performances offensively. Costa Rica will have to win if they want to finish first in Group A. As for the Dominican Republic and Suriname, they both have one more game against each other, but outside of playing for pride of their respective countries, this game will not mean anything in the Gold Cup, as both have been eliminated following their losses against Costa Rica and Mexico. Starting with the Dominican Republic, they were the first team to be officially eliminated from the Gold Cup tournament. However, I don't think this team has anything to be ashamed about, given it is their first time in any major international tournament, and they have actually been pretty competitive. Unfortunately, the mistake which resulted in Costa Rica's winning goal against them was what ended their hopes of continuing on in the tournament. However, with how they have performed so far, don't be surprised if they end up ending the Gold Cup on a positive note with a win against Suriname. As for Suriname, their offense led by Gerano Kirk has been pretty competitive, scoring 3 goals against 3 goals against Costa Rica, and even creating some counterattack attempts against Mexico that gave the defense a bit of a scare, a bit of a run for their money. However, they have had arguably the worst defense in the tournament so far, and it is 100% the reason why Suriname is out in the group stage and might lose to the Dominicans in their final game. In their first game versus Costa Rica, they conceded 2 penalties, and in their second game versus the defending Gold Cup champions in Mexico, they were turnover machines with the ball, and their defending on corner kicks was awful, which allowed Montes to score a brace in the game. Going forward, the defense will be something Suriname will have to improve on if they want to do well in a tough group in CONCACAF's third round of World Cup qualifying. Moving on to Group B, they have yet to complete their second games, which they will play tonight, with Canada playing against Curaçao and Honduras taking on their Central American neighbor El Salvador. As of now, Canada sits first in the group after a dominant performance against Honduras, where they won 6-0. Yes, 6-0. It looks like this Canada team means business. With such a big win and a big goal difference in their first game, Canada has in all practical purposes guaranteed their spot in the quarterfinals and will look to get a second win against Curaçao. Meanwhile, Curaçao and El Salvador are both level in the group standings for second place, both with 1 point each after a 0-0 draw against each other in San Jose. Curaçao will have a very tough game against Canada next. As for El Salvador, the 0-0 draw, you have to imagine, felt underwhelming given they were forced to play defense and only had 39% of ball possession in that game. They will have to be a lot better than that if they want to get an important win versus Honduras, who, after getting destroyed by the Canadians, Honduras will have to win the next 2 games if they want to keep their tournament hopes alive. Moving on to Group C, who yesterday completed their second set of games. This group has been exciting so far and will be probably the most exciting group in the third and final day. Panama dominated against Guadeloupe 5-2 and got a 1-0 win against Guatemala. And while officially not in the next round yet, based on their performances so far, it looks like they are going to be safe and on to the quarterfinals, as a lot would have to go wrong for Panama in their final game to be eliminated in the group stage. Their midfield has been their biggest strength so far and played a key part in their 1-0 win versus Guatemala, creating many counterattacks and chances to score. However, the finishing has not quite been there for them, and this will be something they will look to finally have against Jamaica. Now, this is where things get interesting, as Jamaica, Guatemala, and Guadeloupe all still have a chance to advance into the quarterfinals entering the final match day. Starting with Guadeloupe, it will take a miracle, but nevertheless, there is still a chance, despite losing 5-2 against Panama in their first game. They will have to win and win big against Guatemala to improve their goal differential and hope that Panama beats Jamaica to advance. While there is some hope, I don't think it will last given how Guatemala has been quite competitive in this group. Speaking of Guatemala, it has been a strong performance in the Gold Cup for them so far. They upset Jamaica 1-0 in a game where they dominated the midfield and their passing was on point throughout the game. However, their 1-0 loss against Panama, while Jamaica won 2-1 against Guadeloupe, puts Guatemala in the same spot as they were in 2023. Oscar Santis and Guatemala will have to win against Guadeloupe and hope that Panama either draws or wins against Jamaica, and Guatemala will finish second in the group, which will get them into the quarterfinals. And now moving on to the final team in Group C, Jamaica entered this tournament being seen as one of the heavyweights in this group and in the tournament, with many players playing in England like Leon Bailey and Ethan Pinnock. However, with their first game of the tournament, they were stunned by Guatemala, losing 1-0 in front of a large turnout of Guatemalan fans in Los Angeles. The players themselves know they underwhelmed massively in that game, with one even pushing a cameraman out of his way as the players stormed into the locker room in disgust after that loss. And grinding out a 2-1 win against Guadeloupe doesn't give them room for error in terms of goal differential either. Entering their final game against Panama, a win and Jamaica is into the quarterfinals. If they tie, they will need Guatemala to either lose for them to end up in a scoreless draw against they will need them to end up in a scoreless draw against Guadeloupe. And if they lose, hold on. So it's a little confusing here, just the math. So let me just correct myself here and give me a second to do that. So if Jamaica ties against Panama, they will need Guatemala to either lose or for them to end up in a scoreless draw against Guadeloupe. And in the worst case scenario where Jamaica does lose, they will need Guadeloupe to do just enough to win against Guatemala without dominating and turning their goal differential around. But given how Guatemala has performed so far and that they are expected to win versus Guadeloupe, the Jamaicans have to assume that they cannot rely on that outside help of the other game and that they will have to win against Panama. So a very interesting, a very crazy group entering the final match day. Group C is really looking like the group of life right now. And now on to the final group, Group D, with the United States, guest nation Saudi Arabia, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago. This right now has easily looked like the worst group in the tournament. None of the teams have really impressed, and in some cases, it's just been a battle of who can play the worst, it feels like. The U.S. are safe and on to the next round of the tournament, but they have been very shaky as a team. Granted, this is not their A team, and they don't have guys like Pulisic, McKennie, Gio Reyna, Serginho Dest, and those main players. Some due to Club World Cup commitments, and some not wanting to play and to take a break from football, which has caused some controversy about the players' mentalities in terms of the national team. But nevertheless, with this current team for the Gold Cup, they have been very, very shaky. They lost both games against Turkey and Switzerland, 2 games that were preparation games for this tournament, including a 4-0 loss versus the Swiss team. They then won their first game against Trinidad 5-0, only to follow that up with a very underwhelming 1-0 win against a Saudi B team, where the United States roster is much more talented and should have been much better. They will look to be more convincing against Haiti and hope to spoil Haiti's hopes of advancing to the quarterfinals. As for the Haitian national team, their offense has really let them down in the Gold Cup so far. They have had opportunity after opportunity to score, but cannot finish and put the ball in the back of the net to save their lives. They even got a penalty against Trinidad, only for Mondi Prunier to shoot the ball way too high and into the seats. Now they will need to win against the Americans and hope Saudi Arabia loses against Trinidad. While it is a very uphill battle, they at least need to score a good quality goal and finally capitalize on the chances they constantly create. If they can't do that at least one time, this Gold Cup will be a massive failure for the Haitians. But honestly, this group has been arguably the weakest group in the tournament so far. Trinidad and Tobago got destroyed 5-0 against the US and then followed that up with an abysmal draw, even while Haiti was down a player following a red card in the first half of that game. Everything has gone wrong for them so far, and they will need a miracle now. A win and a Haiti loss against the US if they want to advance. But given how they couldn't even win with an extra player advantage, it's not looking good entering their final game. As for Saudi Arabia, granted most of their main players are also playing in the Club World Cup, but you would hope this B team would take these games more seriously than the way they are right now. They got lucky against Haiti, scoring a goal and being glad Haiti struggles to finish shots. And against the US, it felt like I was watching a replay of how they played against Haiti. There's just nothing there offensively. Fortunately for them, the rest of the group has underperformed as much or more than them to where a win against Trinidad and they are into the quarterfinals. So yeah, a lot of underperforming results for these teams, but somehow they all still have hope of entering the quarterfinals, despite not looking very great. But nevertheless, folks, there you have the CONCACAF Gold Cup group stage so far as they enter the final games of the group stage. Let me know in the comments who you think advances to the quarterfinals in the in the closer groups like Group C. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy my football content, and don't forget to check out my Mexico national team videos as well. Thanks for watching and listening. I'll see you in the next video.